With our header and footer in place, we can now start actually building out all the pages for the front end of our application. We're going to start off by building out our landing page, and the first part of the landing page is the hero block. Let's take a second to go over the design for this and how we're going to break it down into our grid structure in React. So here is the very first part of our landing page. This is the hero block, and this is where we're going to have our slogan and tagline as well as an animation. So to start this off, we'll first need a grid container that's going to represent the entire block here. And it's going to be a grid container so that we can have each side going from left to right with the default direction of row. Then we'll use the justify of space around to make sure that we have them spaced properly. So then, inside of the main grid container, we'll see that we'll first have a grid item container, and this time with a direction of column. And this will allow us to make sure that our text on the left is stacked up on top of each other. Then we'll also have a grid item on the right holding our animation. Then back on the left for our text, inside of that grid item container, we'll then just have a grid item holding the typography and another grid item holding the other typography. Hopefully this helps you visualize a little bit better how we actually break down the design and translate it into a grid structure, because this is really how I think of it whenever I'm going to build out my applications. This also really helps make it clear of what props you'll need to use, whether direction of column or the justify props or whatever other options that you might need. This really helps you think about how you're going to have to arrange the structure of your grid to create any given layout. So we'll be doing this as we go through and build out our application. This one should be relatively simple though, so let's head on over to the code editor and get started. Alright, so I'm here in my terminal and I've got my Strapi server up and running here on the right, and in another tab I'm in the front end folder. Make sure again that you're in the front end folder, and let's go ahead and we'll install a dependency that we'll need to get our animation running. So we will npm install react-lottie, L-O-T-T-I-E. Let's go ahead and let that run. And I'll just talk for a second about what this library is, because this is a wrapper around a package called Lottie that is created by Airbnb. They did a really awesome job creating this package to efficiently load animations on the web. It allows you to create really professional and really nice animations in Adobe After Effects and then export it using a plugin called BodyMovin. So if you have any After Effects experience, then you may be interested in checking that out and seeing how you can add your own custom animations to your projects. That allows us to export the animation as JSON, and then we use the React Lottie package to render that JSON as an SVG animation. One thing to note though is that only a limited number of expressions and effects in After Effects are actually supported to export by BodyMovin, because not everything that After Effects can do, because it's such a complex and powerful program, is able to actually translate into an SVG on the web. So you do have to be kind of careful about what effects you're using, and I actually just had to redo this animation a little bit to make sure that it worked. Now that that's finished, let's go ahead and let's npm run develop to get that running. And now we can head on over to our code. And the first thing that we'll want to do is under our components folder, let's go ahead and create a new folder in here, and we'll call this home. Okay, and this is going to be where we'll store all the components that we'll need to build out our home page or the landing page. Inside of home, let's go ahead and create a new file, and let's call this heroblock.js. Let's go ahead and start by importing all the dependencies that we'll need for this file. So we'll import React. From React, we'll import the grid from @material-ui/core/grid. We'll import the typography component from Material UI. And then we'll go ahead and import the Lottie component from React Lottie that we just installed. Then we can come down and let's also import animation data from up a directory, images, and then data.json. Now let's go ahead, come down, and we will export default, the function hero block, and let's open this up, make sure it's braces. And to start off, we need to create a constant to hold the options for our animation. So we'll create a constant of default options, set this equal to an object, and we can set a few properties here. And if you're interested, you can go to the React Lottie documentation page and see some of the other options that they have here. But let's have a loop property of true, an autoplay property of true, and then an animation data property. And we can set that to animation data that we have imported, but since the property name and the value are the same, we can actually just go ahead and just write animation data, and that is a shorthand for this. So that and this are equivalent. So we'll go ahead and just do that. And we'll come under our option now, and we will return and open that up with a multi-line statement. And we'll start off with the grid container that's going to represent the entire hero block. And from the design we just went over, we know this will need a justify of space around. So let's go ahead and open this up. And now inside of here, we'll create the items for each of our sections, one for the animation and one for the text. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that since we're using the justify prop here, if we were to do a grid item container direction of column here for our text, remember that that container prop is going to give it 100% width, so that would take up 100% of the space available in this parent, and that would make the justify prop not work as expected. So let's use our little trick of creating just a grid item, and then inside of here, a grid container justify or direction of column. And now that will work as expected. And then we can come underneath that and let's add the grid item for our animation. And we can go ahead and set this up with the Lottie component with the options prop of the default options that we created. And then let's also give it a width of 50 rem. And go ahead and make that a self-closing tag. Then we can come back up to our grid container direction of column, and this will be top to bottom for our text. So we can first have a grid item. This will be for our main text. So that will be a typography component with a variant of H1, since that is the style that we set up in our theme. I'll go ahead and open this up, and we'll have the text, the Premiere. And let's come under that and do a line break so that we make sure this is always stacked how we want it. And then we'll have the text developer clothing line. All right. And then we can come underneath the grid item wrapping that typography. And let's give it another grid item. And this will be for our bottom text, which is going to be a typography with a variant of H3. We'll open that up, and this will say high quality custom designed shirts, hats, and hoodies. All right, now we should be able to go ahead and save this component. And now we'll actually need to tell this component to be rendered on the home page. So let's go to our index.js, and under the layout import, let's import the hero block from up a directory, components, home, hero block. And now we can replace the content inside of here with just the hero block component, just like that. All right, so let's go ahead and save this and flip back to the browser and check that out. We've got our text, and we now have this nice little terminal animation running for us. All right, so we're in a pretty good spot, but you see how these are stacked on top of each other instead of sitting from left to right. Well, why is that? Well, if we go ahead and inspect the page here, we can see if we go into this and check out the structure here, it looks like on this div, we've got a huge amount of margin, and it's not allowing us to take up the full width of the page. Okay, and that's actually because of the default in layout.js. It's actually this div right here, this style with the margin 0 in auto and a max width of 960 is constraining all of our content to that small blue section that you see in the middle of the screen. Now, some designs, they tend to only keep all their content right here and not use the extra space on the sides, but I'm really not a fan of that because I think the whole point of having really good, really custom design is that you do intelligently take up the amount of screen space available to you. And I know that there are different opinions on that, but I think that that makes sense, that if you have extra screen real estate, you should be using it. And I think that a lot of people just do this because it is maybe a little more difficult to take up the space correctly for all the different sizes and make sure you're managing it efficiently, but we're going to be able to handle that without any problems in this course. So we'll go ahead and give ourselves all the space we need to work with. So let's go ahead and we'll just get rid of this div actually. We'll get rid of that div, get rid of that, and we will just leave our layout.js looking like this with our header, the div we're using for spacing, and then the main tag with our actual content, and then our footer. All right. So let's go ahead and save that. And I'm actually going to come into our HeroBlock.js as well. And just for the sake of editing, so I don't have the animation constantly playing, I'm going to go ahead and set autoplay to false. And I'm going to add a prop is stopped onto the Lottie component. And I'll just go ahead and save that so that the animation doesn't constantly run. But you can feel free to leave that as you want, and you can go ahead and click on it, and that will actually start the animation as well. But I'll, again, just go ahead and click that to pause it so that it doesn't interfere with my editing. So now we still need to clean this up just a little bit. We want our text here to be centered, not only center aligned, where it's currently left aligned, but we also want it to be down centered up with our animation. Okay, so let's think about that for a second. Since we're in a container of row, the main container for the hero block, that means the main container has a main axis of the horizontal direction, but we want to center our text vertically. We want to move it down and center it with the animation. So that would be the cross axis. So that means we need to use the align items prop. So if we go over here and on the main container, with justify of space around, let's also add the align items prop of center. We can go ahead and save that and flip back on over, and we see that our text is now centered up with the animation. Now we can easily center up the text itself by adding an align equal to center onto the typography component. I'll go ahead and copy that all to both of these here, save it, and flip back on over, and now we've got easily centered text. So that's all it took for us to get our hero block set up and running with an animation in the browser and still being performant. We're really off to a great start. That came together really quickly. It was a nice, simple component. So let's keep on building out the landing page in the next video.